February 15th, 2026, 11:47 a.m. Eastern Time. Right now, the situation in the Persian Gulf just crossed a line we haven't seen in decades. While you were scrolling, sleeping, going about your day, two of the most powerful naval strike forces on planet Earth moved into position off the coast of Iran. Not for exercises, not for posturing, for something far more serious. The USS Gerald R, the largest and most technologically advanced warship ever constructed, is right now crossing the Mediterranean, heading toward the Arabian Sea. It will join the USS Abraham Lincoln carrier strike group already stationed 500 miles off Iran's southern coastline. When both arrive on station, we're looking at over 150 fighter jets, 20 warships, Tomahawk cruise missiles, bunker-busting bombs, and more than 12,000 American service members within striking range of Tehran. But here's what nobody's telling you. According to two U.S. officials who spoke to Reuters on condition of anonymity, the Pentagon isn't planning a one-night punitive strike like we saw last June with Operation Midnight Hammer. They're preparing for weeks-long sustained military operations against Iran. Not just nuclear sites, state infrastructure, command and control nodes, Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps facilities, missile production centers, everything. This isn't deterrence theater. This is preparation for regime-level shock and awe. And in the next 26 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly why this escalation is different, what the timeline looks like, and what happens if diplomacy fails in the next 2 weeks. Let's talk about what just changed everything. Thursday, February 13th, 2026. The Pentagon issues deployment orders for the USS Gerald R carrier strike group. According to the Wall Street Journal, citing 3 senior defense officials, this wasn't a routine rotation. This was an immediate diversion. The Ford had been operating in the Caribbean since November 2025, participating in operations against Venezuela. The crew of 4,500 sailors and Marines had already been at sea for 8 months straight, far longer than the standard 9-month deployment. They were supposed to rotate home. Instead, they got new orders: cross the Atlantic, transit the Mediterranean, head to the Persian Gulf, no rest, no port call, no timeline for return. According to U.S. Southern Command, which oversees military operations in Latin America, the Ford's departure leaves a significant capability gap in the Western Hemisphere. But the administration decided that Middle East contingencies took priority over countering illicit activities in Latin America. That tells you how serious this is. Now, let's talk about what the USS Gerald R actually represents. This is not just another aircraft carrier. This is the most expensive warship ever built. A $13 billion floating fortress powered by 2 A-1B nuclear reactors generating 600 megawatts of electricity. That's enough power to run a mid-sized American city for 50 years without refueling. The Ford doesn't need diesel. It doesn't need to stop for gas. It can stay at sea indefinitely. The flight deck alone spans 4.5 acres. You could fit 3 full-size Walmart supercenters on it. At 106 feet long, it's longer than 3 football fields laid end to end. It displaces over 100,000 tons when fully loaded, equivalent to the weight of 50,000 cars. And it carries more than 75 military aircraft, including F-35C Lightning II stealth fighters, F-A-18 Super Hornets, EA-18G Growlers for electronic warfare, E-2D Hawkeye early warning aircraft, and MH-60 Seahawk helicopters. But the real game changer is the Electromagnetic Aircraft Launch System, or EMALS. Unlike older steam catapult systems, EMALS can launch aircraft faster, more efficiently, and with greater precision. According to U.S. Navy operational data, the Ford can generate 160 sorties per day during standard operations. In a surge scenario when every system is pushed to maximum capacity, the Ford can hit 270 sorties in 24 hours. That's more than 11 aircraft launches every single hour around the clock. Now, at the Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group already on station, the Lincoln carries a similar air wing, another 75 aircraft. Combined, you're looking at the capability to launch over 540 combat sorties in a single day if both carriers operate in surge mode. That's not a show of force. That's an invasion armada. According to multiple defense officials, the Ford departed the Caribbean on February 13th. It has to cross the Atlantic, transit through the Strait of Gibraltar, cross the entire length of the Mediterranean Sea, pass through the Suez Canal, and then sail down the Red Sea into the Arabian Sea. That's a 7,000-mile journey. Even at the Ford's top speed of over 30 knots, approximately 35 miles per hour, that transit will take at least 10 to 14 days. If we do the math, the Ford should arrive on station by late February, possibly February 27th or 28th at the latest. That puts both carrier strike groups in position right at the moment when U.S.-Iran nuclear negotiations in Geneva either succeed or collapse. And here's the kicker. According to reporting from NBC News and the Times of Israel, U.S. envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are scheduled to hold a second round of nuclear talks with Iranian representatives in Geneva this Tuesday, February 17th. Oman is acting as the mediator. The agenda is expansive. The United States wants Iran to accept permanent caps on uranium enrichment, dismantle advanced centrifuge cascades, allow intrusive inspections, and address its ballistic missile program and support for regional militant groups. Iran's position, according to statements from Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi in a BBC interview published just hours ago, is that Tehran is willing to consider compromises on uranium enrichment and nuclear transparency in exchange for the complete lifting of all financial sanctions. But Iran has categorically ruled out discussing its ballistic missile arsenal or its relationships with Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and Iraqi militias. Those are, in Iran's view, sovereign matters not subject to negotiation. In other words, the two sides are still miles apart, and both know it. Thursday, February 12th, 2026, at 9:14 p.m. Eastern Time. President Donald Trump posted on Truth Social, quote, "Last time, Iran decided they were better off not making a deal, and they were hit with Midnight Hammer. Not threatened with, hit with. They know what happens when talks fail. Tremendous power is heading to the region. Make the smart choice." That is not diplomatic language. That is a countdown announcement. Let's revisit what Operation Midnight Hammer actually was. June 21st, 2025. After months of stalled negotiations over Iran's nuclear program, President Trump authorized a large-scale strike on Iranian nuclear facilities. B-2 Spirit stealth bombers flying from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri conducted precision strikes on the Natanz fuel enrichment plant, the Fordo underground enrichment facility, and components of the Isfahan uranium conversion facility. F-35 stealth fighters launched from the Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group hit missile production sites and IRGC command nodes. The operation lasted approximately 11 hours. According to a Pentagon assessment released in July 2025, the strikes set Iran's nuclear program back approximately 2 years. Key centrifuge cascades were destroyed, enrichment capacity dropped by an estimated 60%. But, and this is critical, the program was not eliminated. Iran retained enough technical knowledge, backup equipment, and underground facilities to rebuild. And according to satellite imagery from Planet Labs, analyzed in January 2026, Iran has rebuilt faster than anyone predicted. New centrifuge halls are under construction. Repairs at Natanz are ahead of schedule. Iran is now accelerating toward breakout capacity again. So when Trump references Midnight Hammer, he's reminding Iran of what already happened and promising it will happen again, but this time bigger, longer, and more comprehensive. That's why the planning is different. According to 2 U.S. officials who spoke to Reuters, the Pentagon is now planning for sustained weeks-long operations against Iran if President Trump gives the order. This is fundamentally different from June 2025. One of the officials, speaking on condition of anonymity due to the sensitive nature of the planning, said that in a sustained campaign, the U.S. military could target Iranian state infrastructure, security forces, command and control facilities, not just nuclear sites. The official declined to provide specific details, but emphasized that the scope would be far broader than last year's operation. The second official confirmed that the United States fully expects Iran to retaliate, leading to back-and-forth strikes and reprisals over a period of time. In other words, this wouldn't be a one-and-done punitive raid. This would be a multi-week air and missile campaign with escalating intensity. So what would that actually look like? Let's break it down. Day 1. F-35C Lightning II. Stealth fighters from both the Ford and Lincoln Carrier strike groups, along with F-22 Raptors operating from Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, would establish air superiority and conduct suppression of enemy air defenses, or CAD, missions. EA-18G Growlers would jam Iranian radar and communications networks. The objective is to blind Iran's integrated air defense system before the heavy hitters arrive. Within hours, B-2 Spirit stealth bombers flying from Diego Garcia, or even directly from the continental United States, would penetrate Iranian airspace undetected and deliver GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator bunker buster bombs on hardened underground facilities like Fordo, which is buried 300 feet beneath a mountain. Tomahawk cruise missiles, launched from Arleigh-Burke-class destroyers and Ticonderoga-class cruisers in the Persian Gulf, would hit surface targets including IRGC headquarters, missile production facilities, and command nodes in Tehran, Isfahan, and Bandar Abbas. F-15E Strike Eagles, positioned in Jordan and likely also in Saudi Arabia, would carry out follow-on strikes with Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missiles, or JASSMs, which have ranges exceeding 500 miles. These allow strike aircraft to remain outside Iranian air defense envelopes while still hitting critical targets. According to defense analysts, the F-15E can carry up to 12 air-to-ground munitions plus air-to-air missiles for self-defense, making it one of the most versatile strike platforms in the U.S. arsenal. Day 2 through 7. Sustained airstrikes continue. The objective shifts from initial shock to systematic degradation. Iranian ballistic missile launchers, hidden in tunnels and mobile launchers dispersed across the country, become priority targets. MQ-9 Reaper drones conduct persistent intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, or ISR, feeding targeting data in real time to strike packages. According to Pentagon doctrine, this phase focuses on attrition, degrading Iran's ability to sustain operations by destroying logistics hubs, fuel depots, ammunition storage, and transportation networks. Meanwhile, the U.S. Navy maintains a defensive posture in the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. Aegis destroyers equipped with SM-3 and SM-6 interceptor missiles provide ballistic missile defense for U.S. forces and regional partners. Littoral combat ships and mine countermeasure vessels sweep for Iranian naval mines, which Iran has threatened to deploy to close the Strait of Hormuz if attacked. Week 2 and beyond. By this point, Iran's conventional military capability is severely degraded, but the risk shifts to asymmetric retaliation. Iranian-backed militia groups in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen could launch rocket and drone attacks on U.S. bases and allied infrastructure. Hezbollah might fire missiles into northern Israel. The Houthis could escalate attacks on commercial shipping in the Red Sea and Bab el-Mandeb Strait. Iran's cyber warfare units could target critical infrastructure in the United States and Europe, including power grids, financial systems, and communications networks. And here's the part nobody wants to talk about. According to estimates from the International Institute for Strategic Studies, Iran still possesses between 1,800 and 3,000 ballistic missiles, many hidden in hardened shelters or mounted on mobile launchers. If Iran decides to launch mass salvos against U.S. bases in Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and the UAE, or against Israeli population centers, the result would be catastrophic. Even with advanced missile defense systems like Patriot, THAAD, and David's Sling, no defense is 100% effective. Some missiles will get through. This is why the planning assumes weeks, not days. Because once you start, you can't stop halfway. But there's another factor that makes this situation uniquely dangerous: Iran's domestic instability. According to human rights organizations and reporting from Iran International, an estimated 36,500 Iranians have been killed in protest crackdowns since January 8, 2026. That's not a typo. Over 36,000 people dead in just over a month. The protests, which began after the death of a young woman in IRGC custody, have morphed into the largest anti-regime uprising since the 1979 revolution. Demonstrators are calling for the end of the Islamic Republic, chanting "Death to the dictator" and "Death to Khamenei." In response, the IRGC has deployed live ammunition, armored vehicles, and helicopter gunships in major cities, including Tehran, Isfahan, Mashhad, and Tabriz. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, now 87 years old and reportedly in declining health, faces the most serious threat to his rule in decades. Exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, the son of the last Shah of Iran, has publicly appealed to President Trump to support the Iranian people in finishing what they started. In an interview with Glenn Beck at the Munich Security Conference, Pahlavi said, quote, "The regime cannot change its DNA. For 47 years, it has been hostile to the United States, hostile to Israel, anti-West, anti-democracy from the beginning. A zebra cannot change its stripes." President Trump, asked directly if he supported regime change in Iran, responded, quote, "It seems like that would be the best thing that could happen." For 47 years, they've been talking and talking. In the meantime, we've lost a lot of lives. Legs blown off, arms blown off, faces blown off. It's been going on for a long time. That's as close as a sitting U.S. president has come to endorsing regime change in Iran in modern history, and it fundamentally changes the calculation. Because if Trump believes the regime is going to collapse anyway, why negotiate with a government that might not exist in 6 months? Why offer sanctions relief to a leadership that's killing its own people by the tens of thousands? Iran knows it cannot win a conventional war against the United States. So its strategy is built around making any American attack as painful and as costly as possible, with ripple effects that destabilize the entire region and global economy. Let's start with Iran's ballistic missile arsenal. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, Iran possesses the largest and most diverse ballistic missile inventory in the Middle East. This includes short-range missiles like the Fateh 110, medium-range systems like the Shahab 3, and advanced missiles like the Sejil 2, which has a range exceeding 1,200 miles. Many of these missiles are stored in underground tunnels and can be launched within minutes. In addition, Iran has built up a massive drone inventory, estimated at several thousand one-way attack drones, primarily the Shahed 136 loitering munition. These drones are cheap to produce, approximately $20,000 to $50,000 per unit, and are designed to overwhelm air defenses through saturation attacks. Launch 200 drones at once, and even the most advanced air defense systems will struggle to intercept them all. Then there's Iran's Navy, The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy operates swarms of fast attack boats armed with anti-ship missiles, rockets, and torpedoes. Their doctrine is simple: swarm tactics. Get close enough to launch, or ram the target with explosives. During the Millennium Challenge 2002 wargame, a simulated adversary using similar tactics sank a U.S. aircraft carrier and multiple escort ships in the opening hours of the conflict, forcing the Pentagon to reset the exercise. That was over 20 years ago. Iran has refined those tactics since then. And then there's the Strait of Hormuz, the ultimate economic choke point. Approximately 21 million barrels of oil pass through the strait every single day, roughly 21% of global petroleum supply. If Iran decides to mine the strait, harass tankers with fast attack boats, or launch anti-ship missiles from coastal positions, oil prices will spike vertically within 48 hours. Analysts estimate prices could hit $150 to $200 per barrel in a full closure scenario, triggering a global economic shock. IRGC commanders have stated publicly that any U.S. strike on Iranian territory means U.S. military bases across the Middle East will be targeted. The United States has major installations in Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Jordan, and Turkey. All of them are within range of Iranian ballistic missiles. Even with missile defense systems deployed at these bases, no defense is perfect. Casualties are inevitable. Here's the paradox. The more military force the United States deploys, the harder it becomes to walk back from confrontation. The presence of two carrier strike groups doesn't just provide options. It creates pressure to use them. Because if you assemble this much firepower and then do nothing, you signal weakness. And if you signal weakness, adversaries take risks they otherwise wouldn't. But if you use the force, you trigger the very escalation you were trying to deter. Iran retaliates. U.S. bases get hit. American casualties mount. Oil prices spike. The global economy takes a hit. Domestic political pressure builds to either escalate further or withdraw entirely. Either choice carries massive risks. This is the trap Trump finds himself in. He's simultaneously negotiating and threatening. He's deploying overwhelming force while insisting he wants a deal. He's publicly endorsing the possibility of regime change while his envoys sit across the table from Iranian diplomats in Geneva. It's coercive diplomacy on steroids, but it only works if the other side believes you're willing to follow through. And if they don't believe you, or if they decide they have nothing left to lose, the whole thing collapses into war. Right now, we are in a 2-week countdown. The Ford arrives on station by late February. Negotiations in Geneva either produce a breakthrough or collapse. Trump decides whether to give the green light for sustained operations or whether to extend the diplomatic process. If talks succeed, Iran agrees to verifiable limits on enrichment, accepts intrusive inspections, and makes some concessions on ballistic missiles in exchange for phased sanctions relief. The carriers remain on station as enforcement, but military action is averted. Oil markets stabilize. The region steps back from the brink. If talks fail, we enter uncharted territory. The operational planning shifts from contingency to execution. Strike packages finalize target lists. Aircrews conduct final mission briefs. Tomahawk missiles are loaded. B-2 bombers spin up. And within 72 hours of a presidential decision, the first wave launches. After that, everything changes. Because once the shooting starts, the variables multiply exponentially. Iran's retaliation could be limited or massive. Regional proxies could stay on the sidelines or join the fight. Israel might conduct its own strikes. Russia and China, both of which have strategic partnerships with Iran, could provide intelligence support or even military aid. The Strait of Hormuz could close. Oil prices could double. Global supply chains could fracture. And thousands of people, military and civilian, American and Iranian, could die. This is not fear-mongering. This is strategic reality. When you deploy 2 carrier strike groups, position bombers within range, and publicly threaten weeks-long military operations, you are one decision away from the largest U.S. military engagement in the Middle East since the Iraq War. February 15th, 2026, the USS Gerald R. Ford is crossing the Mediterranean. The Abraham Lincoln is on station in the Arabian Sea. Negotiations are ongoing in Geneva. President Trump has publicly stated that regime change in Iran would be the best possible outcome. The Pentagon is planning for sustained weeks-long operations. Supreme Leader Khamenei is overseeing the massacre of his own people. And the clock is ticking. 2 weeks, that's the window. 2 weeks until the Ford arrives. 2 weeks until diplomatic options either succeed or collapse. 2 weeks until Trump decides whether to negotiate or annihilate. The situation in the Persian Gulf just crossed a threshold we haven't seen in decades. This isn't about nuclear sites anymore. This is about regime survival. This is about regional order. This is about whether the United States is willing to go to war to stop Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon and to potentially enable regime change at the same time. The countdown has begun, and when it ends, nothing will be the same. What do you think happens next? Let me know in the comments below.